The house I kept, I've always lived alone. It's not a choice born from some grand philosophy or a disdain for company, it's just easier. No one to bicker with over whose turn it is to wash the dishes. No debates about whether the thermostat should sit at 68 or 72. No awkward conversations about why I sometimes wake up screaming at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat with no memory of the dream beyond a vague sense of suffocation. It's just me, my books, and the creaky old Victorian house I inherited from my grandmother 6 years ago. I'm Jacob Ellis, 34, a history professor at the community college 2 towns over. And this house, drafty, stubborn, and full of ghosts that aren't quite literal, is my sanctuary. The house sits on the edge of Pennington, a small town where the trees outnumber the people and the streetlights flicker like they're auditioning for a horror movie. It's 3 stories of warped wood and stained glass, with a wraparound porch that groans underfoot and a widow's walk I've never dared climb. Grandma called it a lady with character, which was her polite way of saying it was falling apart. She left it to me when she passed, along with a shoebox of yellowed letters and a warning. Cell phones fail, Jacob. When something goes wrong, you'll want a real phone. That's why the landline stayed, an ancient beige thing mounted on the kitchen wall, its coiled cord tangled like a noose. I kept it connected out of respect for her memory, though I rarely used it. Until that Tuesday night. It was May 16th, a damp, unremarkable evening. I was sprawled on the couch, grading a stack of papers from my Intro to American History class, mostly half-hearted essays about the Revolutionary War, while a documentary about abandoned asylums droned in the background. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and the hum of the refrigerator. I liked the silence. It gave me space to think, to breathe. My cell phone sat on the coffee table, screen dark, until it buzzed to life at 10:33 p.m. unknown number. I frowned. Students sometimes got my number from the syllabus, but prank calls were rare. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some itch in the back of my mind made me pick it up. "Hello?" I said, my voice rough from hours of disuse. Static crackled through the speaker, sharp and grating. I pulled the phone away from my ear, ready to hang up, when I heard it, a faint whisper buried in the white noise. "Jacob!" I sat up straighter, the papers sliding off my lap. "Who is this?" More static then. "The landline will ring. Answer it, please." The call cut off before I could respond. I stared at the screen. Call ended, 12 seconds. My pulse ticking up a notch. A prank, I told myself. One of my students, maybe Tyler Grayson, the class clown who'd once left a fake skeleton in my office chair. They knew I lived alone. Knew my name. But that voice, it hadn't sounded like a kid. It had sounded tired, strained, almost pleading. I shook it off and bent to gather the scattered papers when the landline rang, shrill and insistent, at exactly 10:47 p.m. I froze, my hand hovering over a crumpled essay. 14 minutes had passed since the cell call. Coincidence? I stood slowly, the documentary's narrator muttering about electroshock therapy as I crossed the living room into the kitchen. The beige phone trembled with each ring, its bell-like chime echoing off the peeling wallpaper. I checked the clock on the stove, 10:47 p.m., and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" Silence. Not even static or breathing, just a void. I was about to hang up when I heard it, my own voice whispering, "Don't move." The hairs on my arms stood up. It was me, unmistakably me. The same slight rasp from years of lecturing, the same clipped cadence I'd heard on recordings of my classes. But it was wrong, strained, like I was forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Who is this?" I demanded, gripping the phone tighter. "Please," my voice whispered back. "If you value your life, don't move. Stay perfectly still for the next 60 seconds. Is this some kind of joke? How are you? Please!" The desperation cut me off, sharp and raw. 53 seconds. Don't move. I froze, the receiver pressed against my ear, my eyes darting around the kitchen. The sink gleamed dully under the overhead light, the refrigerator hummed its steady tune, and outside a car rolled past, its headlights slicing through the blinds. Nothing seemed amiss. 38 seconds, my voice hissed. Then I heard it, a sound I hadn't noticed before, a soft, rhythmic click-click-click like fingernails tapping glass. It was coming from the window above the sink, faint but growing louder. My stomach twisted. 11 seconds, the voice warned. The clicking quickened, insistent, almost frantic. I wanted to turn to see what was out there, but the plea pinned me in place. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The clicking stopped, abrupt as a snapped thread. "Now run to your bedroom," my voice said, urgent and low. "Lock the door. Do it now." I dropped the phone, the cord snapping it back against the wall, and bolted. The hallway stretched endlessly, the floorboards creaking under my socks as I sprinted past the staircase and slammed my bedroom door shut. I turned the lock, then dragged my dresser across the hardwood, its legs screeching until it barricaded the entrance. My chest heaved as I pressed my back against it, listening. A faint scrape came from the kitchen, the window sliding open. Then a heavy, wet thud hit the floor, like a sack of meat dropped from a height. Silence followed, thick and oppressive. I slid down to the floor, ear against the door, straining for sound. Footsteps, slow, dragging, moved through the house, accompanied by that same click-click-click. It was searching, pausing at each door before continuing. My pulse thundered in my ears as it reached my room. The doorknob rattled. I bit my knuckles, stifling a gasp. Then my voice, not the one from the phone but something else, spoke from the other side. "Jacob, I smell you." It was distorted, wet, like someone gargling my name through a throat not built for it. Something slammed against the door, the dresser shuddering under the impact. I scrambled back, scanning for a weapon, nothing but books and a lamp. The landline rang again. Not my cell, still in the living room, but a cordless receiver on my nightstand, a phone that shouldn't exist, one I'd never installed. It glowed faintly, buzzing with each ring. Another slam splintered the door as I lunged for it, answering with a shaking hand. "It's mimicking you," my voice said through the receiver, steady now but urgent. "It saw your picture, heard your voice. That's what they do." "What's happening? What is that thing?" I whispered, my eyes locked on the door. "There's no time. It'll break through soon. You need to get out." "How?" "The window. There's a small ledge. You can reach the maple tree if you jump. Do it now." "Who are you?" I demanded, even as I slid the window open, cold air rushing in. "I'm you, Jacob. 6 months from now if you survive tonight." "That's impossible. The burn mark on your left palm from when you were 7. The recurring dream about Grandma's attic. Believe me now?" I glanced at my left hand, the crescent-shaped scar from a hot skillet. A secret I'd never shared. The door buckled behind me, claws tearing through wood. "Why is this happening?" "They found a way through, a thinning between worlds. That thing haunts by mimicking its prey. It'll wear your skin if it catches you." A pause. I nearly didn't make it, but I found a way to warn myself. The dresser toppled. The door burst open. I glimpsed it. Pale, wrong, too many limbs, a face like melted wax with my features smeared across it. I leapt, missing the nearest branch, clipping another with my shoulder and crashing onto the lawn. Pain seared through my ankle, but I limped to my car, keys miraculously still in my pocket, and drove until the house was a speck in the rearview mirror. The road blurred beneath my headlights, a ribbon of asphalt unspooling into the night. My ankle throbbed with every press of the gas pedal, a sharp reminder of the fall from the window, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The rearview mirror stayed empty. No headlights, no pale, lurching figure, but I felt it watching, its waxen face with my stolen features etched into the dark. My car, an old Toyota Corolla I'd meant to replace years ago, rattled as I pushed it past 60, the engine whining in protest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from that house. Pennington's streets were deserted at this hour, the town curled in on itself like a sleeping animal. The sodium glow of streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and stretch as I passed. My hands trembled on the wheel, the crescent scar on my left palm itching as if it knew something I didn't. "I'm you, Jacob. 6 months from now." The words looped in my head, a riddle wrapped in my own voice. How could I call myself? What was that thing, and why me? I pulled into the parking lot of the only 24-hour diner in town, a dingy place called Millie's with a neon sign missing half its letters. The clock on the dash read 11:19 p.m. My phone, left behind in the living room, was useless, but I needed somewhere public, somewhere with light and people, to shake the feeling of being hunted. The diner's windows glowed like a beacon, promising safety, even if I didn't believe it. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and grease. A waitress, mid-50s with tired eyes and a name tag reading Doris, glanced up from wiping the counter. 2 truckers hunched over plates of eggs at the far end, their low murmurs blending with the hum of a jukebox playing some forgotten country tune. I slid into a booth near the door, my back to the wall, and ordered a coffee I didn't intend to drink. Doris set it down with a clink, her gaze lingering. "You all right, hun?" she asked, voice raspy from years of cigarettes. "Look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile, my lips tight. "Just a long night, grading papers." She nodded, unconvinced, and shuffled back to the counter. I wrapped my hands around the mug, the heat grounding me as I replayed the night. The clicking at the window. The voice, my voice, counting down. That thing breaking through my door, its limbs too long, its face a grotesque parody of mine. And the note I hadn't seen yet, the one waiting on my kitchen counter. 6 months, November 16th, it will return. My stomach churned. I'd escaped, but for how long? The jukebox skipped, the song warping into a distorted wail before cutting out. The truckers didn't notice, but Doris muttered something under her breath and smacked the machine. I stared out the window, the parking lot a pool of shadow beyond the diner's light. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement near my car. Something pale darted behind the Toyota, too quick to track. My breath caught. I leaned closer to the glass, squinting, but the lot was still again. A trick of the light, I told myself. Exhaustion, fear. Need a refill? Doris's voice jolted me back. She stood over me, coffee pot in hand, her shadow stretching across the table. No thanks, I said too fast. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press, leaving me to my vigil. The clock above the counter ticked toward midnight. I couldn't go home, not yet, but I couldn't stay here forever either. I needed help, someone to make sense of this. Sarah came to mind. Sarah Nguyen, my colleague at the college, a literature professor with a sharp mind and a knack for digging into the weird. She'd laugh at me, call it a stress-induced breakdown, but she'd listen. I had to try. I left a crumpled 5 on the table and limped to the payphone by the restrooms, fishing quarters from my pocket. The receiver was cold against my ear as I dialed her number from memory. It rang 4 times before her groggy voice answered. Jacob, it's midnight, what's wrong? I need to see you, I said, keeping my voice low. Something happened. I can't explain it over the phone. A pause. Are you hurt? Not really, just, please, Sarah, I need somewhere to crash tonight. She sighed, the sound crackling through the line. All right, you know where I live, but you owe me an explanation, and coffee in the morning. Deal. I hung up, relief warring with dread. Sarah's apartment was 10 minutes away, a small place above a bookstore on Main Street. I could make it. I had to. Back in the car, the engine sputtered before catching, and I pulled onto the road. The streets were still empty, but the shadows felt heavier now, pressing against the windows. Halfway to Sarah's, I heard it, a faint click, click, click from the back seat. My eyes snapped to the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just my jacket crumpled on the seat. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my pulse hammering. You're losing it, I muttered, but the sound came again, sharper, closer. I swerved into a gas station lot, slamming the brakes and twisted around. The back seat was empty. No jacket either, it was still in the house. My throat tightened. I fumbled for the overhead light, flicking it on. The bulb buzzed, illuminating the worn upholstery, the coffee stains, the nothing. I sat there, breathing hard, until a car horn blared behind me. A pickup truck idled, its driver gesturing for me to move. I waved an apology and drove on, the clicking silent now but lingering in my mind like a threat. Sarah's building loomed ahead, a brick relic with a fire escape zigzagging up the side. I parked crookedly and hobbled to the intercom, buzzing her apartment. It's me, I said when she answered. The door clicked open and I climbed the stairs, each step a stab of pain in my ankle. She was waiting in the doorway, her black hair mussed, a robe thrown over pajamas. Her dark eyes narrowed as she took me in, disheveled, pale, favoring my left leg. Jesus, Jacob, you look like hell, she said, stepping aside. What happened? I collapsed onto her couch, the words spilling out before I could stop them. The call, the voice, the thing at my window, the escape. She listened, arms crossed, her expression shifting from skepticism to something unreadable. When I finished, she didn't speak for a long moment, just studied me like I was a text she couldn't decipher. You're serious, she said finally, not a question. I know how it sounds. It sounds like a horror movie, or a psychotic break. She sat across from me in an armchair, leaning forward. But I've known you for 3 years, and you're not the type to make this up. So let's say I believe you, for now. What do you do next? I don't know, I admitted. I can't go back yet. The police won't believe me without evidence, and I'm not sure there is any. But it's not over. It said 6 months. Sarah frowned, tapping her fingers on the armrest. You mentioned a note. Instructions. If you're going back, we need to see it. And we need to figure out what that thing was. We? You think I'm letting you deal with this alone? I've read enough Poe to know you don't ignore something like this. She stood, grabbing her keys from a hook. Get some rest. We'll go to your place in the morning. With coffee. I wanted to argue, to keep her out of it, but exhaustion won. I nodded, sinking deeper into the couch as she tossed me a blanket. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the clicking and a voice, mine, whispering my name. Chapter 3. Echoes in the daylight morning broke gray and heavy, the sky bruised with clouds. Sarah drove us back to the house, her Prius humming quietly while I clutched a to-go cup from Millie's, the coffee cold and untouched. My stomach knotted as we turned onto my street. The Victorian loomed ahead, its gables sharp against the overcast sky, its windows dark and unblinking. It looked unchanged, no shattered glass, no claw marks, but that only made it worse, like it was waiting. Sarah parked in the driveway, her jaw tight. "You sure about this?" "No," I said, but I opened the door anyway. My ankle screamed as I stepped out, but I ignored it, limping toward the porch. The air smelled of rain and something faintly sour, like rotting leaves. Sarah followed, a flashlight in one hand, her phone in the other. "For pictures," she said when I raised an eyebrow. "Evidence." The front door was locked, the key still in my pocket from the night before. I turned it, the mechanism clicking too loudly in the stillness, and pushed it open. The living room smelled of dust and old paper, the same as always. My phone lay on the coffee table where I'd left it, screen dark. The papers I'd been grading were scattered across the floor, but nothing else seemed disturbed. No footprints, no blood, no sign of the chaos I'd fled. Sarah swept the flashlight beam across the room, the light catching on the spines of my bookshelves. "Looks normal," she said, but her voice was tight. "It's not." I moved to the kitchen, my steps slow, deliberate. The landline hung on the wall, its cord coiled neatly. The window above the sink was intact, the glass unmarred. But there, on the counter, was the note, a single sheet of lined paper, folded once. My handwriting stared back at me, jagged and hurried. 6 months, November 16th. It will return. Be ready to make the call. The loop must continue. Below it, a mess of equations and diagrams, wiring schematics, numbers I didn't understand, references to temporal resonance and frequency alignment. Sarah peered over my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. "What the hell is this?" "I don't know," I said, tracing the words. "It's me, but not me. Like it knew I'd need this." "Temporal loop," she muttered, snatching the paper. "Time travel? That's what it's implying, right? You calling yourself from the future?" "Maybe, but how and why?" She didn't answer, her eyes scanning the diagrams. "We need someone who gets this. Physics, engineering, Patel at the college. He's a nut about theoretical stuff, he might know." "Dr. Patel?" I pictured the wiry professor, always scribbling equations on napkins during faculty meetings. "You think he'd believe this?" "No, but he'd be too curious to say no." She folded the note and tucked it into her pocket. "Let's check the bedroom. You said it broke in there." The hallway felt narrower than usual, the walls pressing in as we climbed the stairs. My bedroom door stood ajar, the dresser upright against the wall, not toppled, not splintered. The bed was unmade, the cordless phone silent on the nightstand. I stared at it, a chill crawling up my spine. "That shouldn't be here," I said, pointing. "I don't have an extension in this room." Sarah frowned, picking it up. The screen was blank, no power light, but when she pressed the talk button, a faint dial tone buzzed. "This is creepy as hell," she said, setting it down like it might bite. "Anything else out of place?" I scanned the room, my gaze landing on the window. It was closed, locked, but a faint scratch marred the glass, 3 parallel lines etched into the pane. "There," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That wasn't there yesterday." Sarah snapped a photo, the flash glinting off the scratches. "Okay, that's something. Let's get out of here. This place is giving me the creeps." We didn't argue. Back in the car, I clutched the note, retrieved from Sarah's pocket, while she dialed Patel. The scratches, the phone, the mimic's absence, it all swirled in my head, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. And beneath it all, a growing certainty. Whatever had come for me wasn't gone. It was waiting, biding its time, and I had 6 months to figure out how to fight it, or become it. Sarah's Prius purred as we pulled away from the house, the Victorian shrinking in the side mirror until it was swallowed by the gray haze of the morning. My fingers tightened around the note, its edges creasing under my grip. The scratches on the bedroom window, the cordless phone that shouldn't exist, the mimic's absence, it all gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't dig out. Sarah kept her eyes on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, but I could tell she felt it too, the weight of something watching. "Where to?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Patel's office?" "Yeah," I said, though my throat was dry, the word barely audible. "He's our best shot at figuring this out." She nodded, turning onto Main Street. The town crawled by outside, shop fronts shuttered, trees swaying in a wind that carried the faint tang of decay. My ankle pulsed with every bump in the road, a dull ache that matched the rhythm of my thoughts. 6 months, November 16th. It will return. The note's warning looped in my head, but it was the clicking that haunted me most. Those sharp, deliberate taps against glass, echoing from the backseat of my car the night before. I hadn't told Sarah about that yet. I wasn't sure I could. We reached the college just after 10 a.m., the campus a sprawl of red brick buildings and leafless oaks. Pennington Community College wasn't prestigious. Most students were locals scraping by for an associate's degree, but it was familiar, a tether to normalcy I desperately needed. Sarah parked near the science building, a squat structure with peeling paint and a roof that leaked every spring. Dr. Vikram Patel's office was on the second floor, a cluttered cave of books, circuit boards, and half-finished coffee cups. He was there when we arrived, hunched over a laptop, his wiry frame dwarfed by a sweater 2 sizes too big. "Jacob, Sarah," he said, peering over his glasses, his accent a soft lilt from his years in Mumbai. "To what do I owe this unscheduled visit? Grading woes again?" "Not exactly," Sarah said, closing the door behind us. She pulled the note from her pocket and slid it across his desk. "We need your brain. This is complicated." Patel's eyebrows climbed as he unfolded the paper, his eyes darting over the equations and diagrams. "Temporal resonance? Frequency alignment? This looks like something out of a sci-fi novel." He glanced at me, then back at the note. "Whose handwriting is this?" "Mine," I said, shifting in my seat. "But I didn't write it. Not yet." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Explain." I told him everything. The call, the mimic, the escape, the note. Sarah chimed in with the scratches and the phantom phone, her voice steady where mine faltered. Patel listened, his expression shifting from curiosity to a frown that deepened with every word. When I finished, he tapped the note with a pen, the sound a faint echo of the clicking I couldn't shake. "This is extraordinary," he said, almost to himself. "If it's true, and I'm not saying I buy it yet, it suggests a localized temporal anomaly. A loop, yes, but tied to specific conditions. The landline, perhaps? Or the house itself?" "Can you make sense of it?" Sarah asked. "The diagrams, the calculations?" "Possibly. It's advanced, beyond my usual work, but I've dabbled in theoretical physics. This mentions a thinning, a breach in space-time. If we assume that's real, the instructions could be for stabilizing it or exploiting it." He paused, meeting my gaze. "You're saying you'll write this in 6 months to warn yourself now?" "That's what he told me," I said. "I don't know how, or why it's happening." Patel rubbed his temples. "I'll need time, and equipment. If this is a prank, it's a damn clever one. If it's not..." He trailed off, his eyes flicking to the window. "I'll help, but you two should be careful. Things like this don't stay quiet." We left his office with a promise to regroup tomorrow, the note in his hands and a pit in my stomach. Sarah drove me back to her place, the silence between us thick with unspoken questions. I wanted to believe Patel could unravel it, but the clicking lingered in my ears, a phantom sound that followed me up her stairs and into her apartment. That night I couldn't sleep. Sarah had crashed on her bed, leaving me the couch again, but the blanket felt like a shroud, trapping heat against my skin. The clock on her wall ticked past 2 a.m., each second a hammer against my skull. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster when I heard it. Click, click, click. Soft, deliberate, coming from the window across the room. My breath hitched. I sat up slowly, the blanket pooling around my waist, and squinted into the dark. Sarah's apartment was on the second floor, above the bookstore, with no balcony or ledge outside, just a sheer drop to the alley below. The blinds were drawn, slivers of streetlight seeping through, but something moved behind them, a shadow that didn't match the sway of the trees. Click, click, click. Louder now, insistent. I slid off the couch, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, and crept toward the window. My hand hovered over the blinds, trembling. I didn't want to look, but I had to know. I parted them an inch, peering into the night. It was there, clinging to the brick wall like a spider. Pale, too many limbs, its body bent at angles that defied bone. Its face, my face, stared back, eyes hollow pits, mouth stretched wide in a grin that showed too many teeth. The clicking came from its throat, a wet, guttural rhythm as it pressed a clawed hand against the glass. "Jacob," it rasped, my voice but wrong, like a recording played underwater. "I see you." I stumbled back, the blinds snapping shut, and hit the coffee table with a thud. The lamp toppled, shattering on the floor. Sarah burst from her room, a baseball bat in hand, her eyes wild. "What the hell?" "It's here," I whispered, pointing at the window. "It followed me." She froze, then edged toward the blinds, bat raised. "Stay back," she said, her voice low. She yanked them up, the cords rattling, and we both stared. Nothing. Just the empty alley, the dumpster below, the flicker of a dying streetlight. No mimic, no claws, no clicking. "It was there," I said, my voice cracking. "I swear." "I believe you," she cut in, her grip tightening on the bat. "But it's gone now, or hiding." She lowered the blinds, her hands shaking slightly. "We're not waiting for Patel. We need answers now." She grabbed her phone and dialed, pacing as it rang. "Vikram, it's Sarah." "Yeah, I know it's late. We've got a problem, a big one. Get to my place, bring whatever you need to decode that note, and hurry." I sank onto the couch, the clicking still echoing in my skull. It wasn't gone. I could feel it. Its hollow eyes, its stolen voice, waiting just out of sight. Sarah hung up, her face set with a determination that scared me almost as much as the mimic. "He's on his way," she said. "We're figuring this out tonight, Jacob. No more running." But as she spoke, a new sound drifted from the hallway outside her door. A slow, dragging shuffle, punctuated by that relentless click, click, click. It was inside the building now, climbing the stairs, and it knew exactly where I was. Sarah's apartment door was solid oak, a relic from the building's days as a boarding house, but it rattled as the shuffling grew louder. Click, click, click. The sound clawed at my nerves, each tap a needle under my skin. Sarah pressed her back against the wall, bat raised, her breath shallow. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, its blade dull but better than nothing, and joined her near the door. The shuffling stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. "Maybe it's gone," I whispered, but I didn't believe it. Sarah shook her head, her eyes locked on the doorknob. It twitched, a faint jerk, then turned slowly, the lock holding, for now. A low rasp came from the other side, my voice again mangled and wet. "Jacob, let me in, it's cold out here." My stomach lurched. "Don't listen," I said, more to myself than her. "It's not me." "I know," she hissed, but her hands trembled. The doorknob rattled harder, the wood groaning under pressure. Then a thud, something heavy slammed against it, the frame splintering at the hinges. Sarah swung the bat at the air, a warning, as I gripped the knife tighter. "Patel's 5 minutes out," she said, her voice barely steady. "We hold it off until then." Another thud, louder, and the door buckled inward, a claw piercing through the wood. It was long, bone-white, tipped with a jagged nail that gleamed in the dim light. The mimic's face pressed against the gap, my face but melted, eyes too wide, mouth a gaping slash. "I smell you," it croaked, the clicking pulsing from its throat. Sarah swung the bat, smashing the claw back through the hole. The thing shrieked, a sound like glass grinding on metal, and retreated. Footsteps, too many, uneven, shuffled down the hall, fading toward the stairs. We stood frozen, listening, until headlights flashed through the blinds. Patel. "He's here," Sarah said, grabbing her keys. "We're getting out." We bolted, not waiting for the mimic to return. The hallway was empty, but the air felt wrong, too cold, too still. The stairwell reeked of damp rot, the steps creaking as we descended. Halfway down I saw it, a shadow at the bottom, too tall, too thin, its limbs bending backward as it climbed toward us. Click, click, click. Sarah cursed, shoving me back up. "Roof!" she yelled. We reversed course, bursting through a fire door onto the flat rooftop. The town sprawled below, a patchwork of lights under the bruised sky, but the mimic's clicking followed, growing louder. Sarah wedged the bat under the door handle, buying us seconds. Patel's car idled in the alley below, his silhouette waving frantically. "There!" I pointed to the fire escape, rusted but intact. We scrambled down, the metal groaning under our weight, as the door above crashed open. The mimic lunged, its too many limbs scrabbling over the edge, my face leering down at us. I slipped, my ankle giving out, but Sarah grabbed my arm, hauling me to the ground. Patel's sedan screeched up, the passenger door flung open. "Get in!" he shouted, his voice high with panic. We dove inside, Sarah in the back, me up front as he floored it. The mimic hit the pavement behind us with a wet crunch, its limbs folding unnaturally as it rose, but we were already gone, tires squealing into the night. "What the hell was that?" Patel demanded, his glasses fogged with sweat. "It's after me," I said, breathless. "It mimics. It knows me." He swerved around a corner, the note clutched in one hand. "I've started decoding it. The thinning. It's not random. Your house is a focal point, a tear between worlds. That thing came through it." "How do we stop it?" Sarah asked, leaning between the seats. "We don't," Patel said grimly. "Not yet. The note's instructions, they're for a call, yes, but also a trap. You need to close the loop, Jacob, or it keeps coming." The clicking echoed faintly behind us, a promise in the dark. I looked at my palm, the scar glowing faintly, or so it seemed in my exhaustion, and knew the nightmare was just beginning. The sedan tore through Pennington's empty streets, the engine's roar drowning out the faint click-click-click that trailed us like a shadow. Patel's hands shook on the wheel, his glasses slipping down his nose as he muttered equations under his breath. Sarah clutched the bat in the back seat, her eyes darting to the windows, while I stared at the note in my lap, its ink smudged from my sweaty palms. 6 months, November 16th. It will return, be ready to make the call. Today was May 17th. I had 183 days to prepare, or to run, but the mimic's pursuit told me running wasn't an option. "We can't keep driving," Patel said, swerving past Millie's diner, its neon sign a blur. "It's tracking you, Jacob. The house, the thinning, is the key." "Then we go back," Sarah said, her voice hard. "We finish this." "No," I snapped, my chest tight. "You saw it. It's not just one anymore, it's growing." Patel glanced at me, his eyes sharp. "The note's instructions aren't just a warning. They're a blueprint, a temporal trap. If we build it, we might seal the breach and stop that thing for good." "And if we don't?" Sarah asked. He didn't answer, but the silence was enough. I nodded, the decision settling like lead in my gut. The house, then. But we need a plan. We ditched the car 2 blocks from the Victorian, approaching on foot under a sky that churned with storm clouds. The air was thick, electric, the sour rot smell stronger now, clinging to my throat. The house loomed ahead, its gables jagged teeth against the gray, its windows dark but alive, watching. My ankles screamed as we climbed the porch steps, but adrenaline kept me moving. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been, the living room unchanged, papers scattered, phone silent, yet wrong, like a stage set for a play I didn't want to star in. Patel spread the note on the coffee table, pulling tools from his bag. A multimeter, wires, a soldering iron. "The landline's the anchor," he said, tracing the diagrams. "It's been modified, your grandmother's work, maybe. We rewire it to amplify the frequency, create a feedback loop. If the thinning's a tear, this could stitch it shut." "Or rip it wider," Sarah muttered, but she grabbed a flashlight and started searching for supplies. I headed to the kitchen, the beige phone still mounted on the wall, its cord a lifeline I didn't trust. As I unhooked it, a faint click-click-click echoed from the hallway. I froze, the receiver slipping in my hand. "Sarah?" I called, voice low. "Here!" she shouted from upstairs, her footsteps thumping. It wasn't her. The clicking grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate, coming from the stairwell. I backed away, the knife from Sarah's apartment still in my pocket, its dull blade a weak comfort. A shadow stretched across the wall, too tall, too thin, limbs bending wrong. My face emerged from the gloom, pale and melted, eyes black pits. "Jacob!" it rasped, my voice a gurgling mockery. "You can't leave me." I bolted for the living room, slamming the door behind me. Patel looked up, startled, as I shoved the couch against it. "It's here," I said, breathless. "Now!" He cursed, fumbling with the wires. "We need 10 minutes, keep it out." The door shuddered, claws scraping wood. Sarah burst in from the hall, a toolbox in hand, her face pale. "There's more," she said. "Upstairs, they're wearing my face now." A thud from above, the ceiling creaked, dust sifting down. The mimic at the door slammed harder, its clicking a frenzied chant. Patel worked faster, soldering wires to the landline's guts, his hands steady despite the chaos. "Almost there," he muttered. "The loop's the key. You make the call, Jacob. It binds the thinning to you." "Me?" I grabbed his arm. "What happens to me?" He met my gaze, grim. "You become the anchor. It might trap you here, forever, or it might end it. I don't know." Another crash, the door splintered, a claw bursting through. Sarah swung the bat, smashing it back, but more clicking echoed from the windows, the walls, the floor. They were everywhere, a chorus of stolen voices whispering my name, Sarah's, even Patel's. Faces pressed against the glass, mine, hers, his, melted and wrong, teeth gleaming in 2 wide mouths. "Finish it!" Sarah yelled, as a mimic clawed through the ceiling, dropping with a wet thud. It wore her face, but twisted, one eye dangling by a thread. I stabbed it with the knife, the blade sinking into wax-like flesh, black ichor oozing out. It shrieked, flailing as Patel shouted, "Done!" The landline buzzed, its screen glowing an unnatural green. He thrust the receiver at me. "Dial your number, your cell, now!" My hands shook as I punched it in, the room a cacophony of clicking and screams. The line rang once, twice, then, "Hello?" My voice from last night, tired and confused. "Don't move!" I shouted, the words tearing from my throat. "Stay still for 60 seconds, it's coming!" The mimics froze, their heads snapping toward me, eyes narrowing. The air thickened, time buckling. I felt it, a pull in my chest like threads stitching me to the house. The call looped, my voice echoing from the phone, from the mimics, from the walls. "Run to your bedroom, lock the door." The words I'd heard, now spoken, a circle closing. The room shuddered, the thinning tearing wider, then snapping shut. The mimics wailed, their forms dissolving into smoke, sucked into the floor, the walls, the landline itself. Silence fell, heavy and final, broken only by our ragged breathing. The phone went dark, its glow fading. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her bat dripping ichor. Patel slumped against the table, exhausted. "The breach is closed, the loop held." I stared at my palm, the scar pulsing faintly. "But I'm still here," I said, dread coiling in my gut. "I didn't escape." He nodded, slow. "You're the anchor now. The house needed a keeper. Your grandmother knew." Sarah grabbed my arm. "We can leave. Burn it down." "No," I said, pulling free. "It's me. I feel it. If I go, it opens again. They come back." She stared, tears welling, but didn't argue. Patel packed his tools, his voice soft. "I'll check the calculations. There might be a way to free you. Later." "Later," I echoed, hollow. They left, promising to return. But I knew they wouldn't. The house was mine now, its weight mine to bear. Epilogue. The keeper's watch days turned to weeks, then months. November 16th came, and the clicking returned, not from mimics but from the house itself, a heartbeat in the walls. I stayed, rewired the landline again, made the call when the thinning pulsed, warning myself anew. The loop held, but each time I felt less human, more a part of the Victorian. Its creaks my voice, its shadows my skin. One night, the phone rang without me dialing. I answered, expecting my own echo. Instead, a voice, not mine, hissed through static, low and ancient. "Good work, keeper, but we see you. We wait." I hung up, the clicking louder now, not just from the house but beyond. Outside, in the dark where things older than mimics stirred. The loop wasn't the end, it was the beginning.